So good evening everyone, my name is Kim Farrant and I'd like to welcome you all to What Men Really Think About. This is an ongoing series of public forums looking into the issues that most men often don't talk about, and especially not in public. So as your host and the creator of the forums, I'm very excited tonight about our topic that I have chosen, which is what men really think about love. So we have three extraordinary guests for you this evening, and I'd like to introduce them to you, starting with Tim Rogers. Tim is one of the most gifted and notoriously wild and wonderful musicians that this country has ever known. He's the frontman and lyricist for the legendary Australian rock band UMI, and his more recent incarnation with the Temperance Union. Tim, I will go on. Tim has been, he's been swanning the stage for over 2 decades now, showing his age, around the globe, and singing many beautiful songs, and a lot of them about love, which will break your heart. And according to Tim, his lyrics pay homage to the most noble and foolish of pursuits. His anatomy a testament to his calamities.
You can quote me on that.
Thank you. Please welcome the fabulous Tim Rogers. Our second guest is the acclaimed author and Vietnam veteran, Barry Heard. Barry survived the Vietnam War only to come home a completely destroyed man. 30 years after the war, Barry picked up a pen and started writing about the nightmare, the cruelty of a time and a place where so many were killed, and many of those his friends. Barry's books, Well Done Those Men in particular, and View from Connors Hill and Tag, all pay tribute to Barry's experiences there, his understanding and insights being recognised and inspiring thousands of people around the world. So we are very honoured to have Barry here this evening. Please welcome Barry Heard. Our third and final guest is the incredible AFL Premiership winning footballer and social activist Harry O'Brien. Harry plays on the back line of Collingwood, the best team in the league, and is one of the sport's most loved and adored players. But Harry has a huge life outside of the AFL football field, where he is very, very consciously raising awareness for marginalised groups around the world, as well as he's very outspoken about social justice issues. And Harry was recently chosen as one of the ambassadors for the Dalai Lama's Australian tour, a huge privilege. So welcome Harry O'Brien.
Thank you.
How gorgeous are these men? So it's actually really the reason that I created the forums, but anyway. And I've really asked the men to dig deep. This is not cerebral dissertations about love. This is about them sharing of their lives and how love has affected them. So, to level the playing field, I've also written a story about love that I will read out first, so that I am as exposed as these brave men have agreed to all be. The first man I ever loved was my father. On the day I was born, he loved me unconditionally. He totally accepted me. I was pure love. As time went on, in some ways, he loved me too much, in ways that should have been reserved for my mother. So love became confusing, something I wanted and something I feared at the same time. Being a workaholic, my father would often leave before we woke and come home after we were asleep. My 3 older brothers and I all vied for his attention. Waking up to a violet crumble on my pillow, or a Mars bar, was often the only evidence I had that he still loved me. That, or recollections of some strange middle-of-the-night wandering hands or fingers inside of me. Guilt would come in the morning and see him withdraw completely, as if nothing ever happened. And so the stage was set. Now I understood. Love equaled invasion, and love was scarce. Hungry for it and getting by on very little, at the age of 14, I discovered how to get love another way. I rejected my father and found men, many of whom were twice my age. My body could no longer tell what was love and what was abuse, and neither could I. At 18, I found out that my dad had been interfered with his entire childhood by an uncle. I then experienced a new kind of love. Compassion for the confused little boy that he once was. Whilst what he did to me was wrong, I could no longer keep blaming him. He did the best with what he knew how. He had learnt that sex was love, and so I forgave him. When my father died when I was 22, I think deep down I made a pact with myself that I would never let myself love again and feel the pain of someone leaving me ever again. One random night, many years later, my father spoke to me from the grave. His voice came to me just before I fell off to sleep, and he simply said this: "We're here to love." From that moment on, it was like I had this secret I wished I'd never been told, because I now knew I could no longer have an excuse to push love away. However, I procrastinated for a couple more years, religiously putting my work, my newfound love, above everything else. My sense of self completely derived from my achievements, until finally one day, the ache inside of me to connect, to really lay down my soul in surrender, came and slaughtered me. I felt broken, devastatingly lonely, and completely shut down. It felt like if I actually didn't wake up and walk towards love, I would soon shrivel up and die. I knew I had a choice. I could either keep living in a state of deprivation and longing, where I was safe, forever bemoaning to my girlfriends how love kept eluding me, or there was not enough gorgeous men out there, blah, 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 or I could risk opening up again. I could recognise that that for which I had been seeking is indeed what I actually am. That I was born love, and that I can share my deepest love and this massive, radiant, big heart with a man and risk it breaking over and over again. Recently, love knocked on my door. Before I knew it, I was already running down the street. And then I caught myself. I stopped, turned around, and slowly started walking back, heading towards my greatest fear: love. Thank you. It's a relief. So I would like to now offer you the chance to read your story, Tim.
Thank you, Kim. You love yourself. Whether on the verdant playing fields of this nation's unheralded learning institutions or strolling insouciantly through their passages of bitumen, you love yourself was a taunt, was fierce and damning, and yet, as a put-down, opaque enough to negate any attempt at retaliation. As opposed to pizza face, big nose, or the multifarious physical targets, a response to the accusation of self-love was harder to negotiate. Pleading wrongful indictment would necessitate evidence. Well, how could I love myself with this chest of acne and inopportune erections? This greasy, lachrymose, self-stimulating stick insect. For what could I deserve this charge? I too, I'm ashamed to say, had directed the accusation towards my peers as a youth, a perfunctory footy player at best until my glorious renaissance at middle age. I incriminated teammates, those ruck rovers with supine, silky skills propelling themselves through drills unscarred. Loves himself. Also in academia, towards pale, studious waifs propelling themselves through an education, nonchalant, knowing smiles exhibited post-examination. Fuck that guy, loves himself. It was jealousy, of course it was, but what an odd voice for jealousy to acquire, an accusation of self-love. As a parent now, I have no greater wish for my 10-year-old daughter than to love herself for her sweet, patient, capricious, contemplative, empathetic, vegetable-weary nature. Correspondingly, I see her illuminate with a giddy happiness when her parents lose themselves in joie de vivre. So I believe she thinks the same. And yet, more often than not, she's seated across the dinner table from a rather lugubrious, rheumy-eyed, divorced single father, capable of immense joy and felicity, however shackled with an abiding lack of self-love. Perhaps needless to say, when I'm truly engaged in any kind of filial activity, my pride and wonder at the evolution of this most wonderful young lady, who at times, I ruminate, may have inherited some traits from me, self-love trickles over me like a self-sourcing pudding. They were popular some years back, Harry. I can't help but wonder where and whence did an appreciation and a recognition and a love for oneself become such a dishonourable pursuit. A satisfaction with oneself was smug, an appreciation of one's own skills was shameful vanity. My mum recently reminded me of a conversation we had at 16. It was the first time I'd broken down in tears in front of her since she sliced my ear in a hair-cutting tragedy. I told her that my grandma had taken me aside at 10 and rather sternly told me that everything I had gotten and will get in my life came easy. That I was physically lithe and unfairly able compared to my older brother, who was not so nimble but nonetheless intelligent and witty. It appears at times as if I've undermined any good fortune I've been afforded for the shame of getting things too easy. Friendships, romantic relationships have all been scuppered because of some nagging voice in my head that I don't deserve it. I don't deserve the love of someone else. Or was it? Immersion in that golden age of musical self-loathing from which my illustrious career spewed forth. The early 90s. A mythical time of yore whence young men and women projected caterwauling anthems of not, in the great tradition of beautiful rock and roll, pronouncements of sexual desire and self-mythology, but paeans to self-disgust. As a teenager, strapping a guitar on and prancing about like a satyr in a tutu was the conduit to all that was due to the ravages of adolescence unattainable. Sex, liberation, poetry, romance, petty crime, velvet trousers, and a possible sandwich platter. Such a noble quest was hindered by the musical mores of the age and 100 hurtle bottles toward my side of the stage. You fucking rock star. It was the abuse of the age. Playing rock and roll music, as well as being my introduction to the dark arts, was where I thought I'd found my worth and my bundle. It was the only time my body felt calibrated with itself and my only thoughts were reflexes. When all was noise and phantom power behind me, I felt capable of anything. Which I may posit what part of loving yourself may be, that you're capable of anything. But the catcalls were loud enough that my intestinal fortitude was diluted and I affected a tetchy, woebegone demeanour, albeit cloaked with more velvet than most of my troll-like contemporaries. My first forays onto the louder stages of the nation coincided with the advent of years of rather debilitating anxiety attacks that rendered me incapable of anything at all, save the odd gig. Each hour, each day was a nervous wait to see if the fear was going to arrive unannounced. It was harrowing, but goddamn if it didn't keep me busy, and I developed rather pronounced cheekbones, for which I'm also grateful to my nemesis. So love, be it romantic or self-regarding, just didn't seem possible. It's a 24-hour job sterilising your body free of imaginary enemies and wrapping your brain in tight gauze. Gauze, its medical term, in the more colloquial vernacular, let's call it booze. That smelly little security blanket that erodes down to the barest of strands over time. I truly felt capable of nothing, and the past 15 years have been a slow climb out of that shallow little grave, and the abject relief, even the pride I allow myself to feel for emerging, has given me a capacity to embrace love and enjoy periods of great expectation. Post-divorce, and just recently being told by someone I love absolutely dearly that they have found it impossible to love somebody that hates themselves so much, has necessitated me to consider where did the affectation of self-denouement end and the real internal negation begin. Is it possible to love when you're catatonically self-conscious? In all my bluff and bluster about expressing love to those dear to you, is it just a performance in search of another audience? Love, to quote the great philosopher Steven Tyler of Aerosmith, is hard on the knees. I'll stop it. I've sabotaged most of the good that's come my way with jealousies imagined, angers exhumed, enemies defictionalised. My most destructive actions are precipitated by self-doubt and self-disgust. How could I possibly pursue relationships of love when my little default movement is to swallow gourds of liquor to derail the train of painful thoughts? All that occurs is the fears are hardwired into my noggin. The shadowy little companion that tells me I'm not worth it and I don't deserve love keeps needling me, and no amount of theatrical noise-making drives him out of the room. However, when the blood is wiped from the walls and the lacerations bandaged, I want more of it. Without the drama, the self-abuse, the damage, but love. Be it friendship, romance, a little pet. And lastly, myself, and consequently allow somebody the consistent and apparently enjoyable experience of loving me.
Wow. Mind trip.
Wow, you're amazing.
Amazing.
You're amazing. Cheers.
Beautiful. Did any of it make any sense?
Absolutely. I want to ask you this, Tim. It sounds like a lifetime of not loving yourself has kind of cost you greatly in terms of alcohol abuse, can't have been too kind to your liver, and the anxiety coming from a place of not loving yourself can't be easy. And then also you mentioned recently someone that you love dearly not being able to be with you because you couldn't love yourself. So my question to you is, do you feel like you're finally at a point where you can let love in, where there's more benefits to self-love than self-hatred?
Just still discovering it, really. I mean, what has worried me greatly and seems to perpetuate more of it is that I'm from a comparably privileged background, lower middle class, West Australian. My parents they're great people, hardworking people, and where that kind of derailment all comes, I'm really not sure where it happens. I mean, I've been to a number of different paid professionals who have offered insights, but it's only in the past couple of years that I've really understanding that's the root of the problem, and so I really need to work on that. That you need to arrange a basket of flowers before you hand someone a bouquet. So throwing myself as a ragtag of weeds and frankly great stemmed flowers is that's not a great gift to give to somebody. And I don't know where, as I said in that, where the self-hatred was an affectation and a bit of just a security blanket. And when you look back and see that you've destroyed quite a lot through bad behaviour that isn't all a quest for fun and for kicks and rock and roll, man, it's actually just physically painful and cause a lot of damage.
So without having to be funny or perform or be entertaining or all of those things, can you feel that you're lovable?
Tonight?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not sure. Like I say, I haven't really figured it out. It's an interesting search. I think that this time after you come off stage or during performance, it all just gets a little discombobulated, which in the past has been, hey, yeah, that's rock and roll. Let's rack up and let's drink all night, and that'll still happen, but just probably with less frequency. Expecting people to go along with you living that way as if life is a performance is a drag. I've experienced it in my romantic relationships as well. It's difficult to know where you stand. I guess my greatest love at the moment is obviously my daughter, and she doesn't give a frig that I play in a rock and roll band. She cares that it's chocolate croissants on Saturday and hot chocolates every morning. I take her to school, and that I'm never late, and that there's something reliable in me. I try to do now, and I tell people I love them, like I said, and absolutely people I'm in love with, I'll let them know and be as flouncy as hell. I think just something about love that's very quiet and consistent and in a consistency, and as experiencing that with my daughter, that's been, as any parent would know, a complete eye-opener, and hopefully I can transfer that to other places.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Beautiful.
Very
Okay.
privileged to be here, by the way. I have enjoyed my time with these gentlemen, the 6 weeks that you kept us locked up at the back. Very much. Very much.
Which leads me to Barry. Would you like to share with us your story?
Yeah, thank you. 1950s, I grew up in a remote country area with brothers, a stepfather, and a mother who gave hugs as often as Halley's Comet appeared. My own father died after World War II. By the end of year 10, I learned that education was for nerds and reading books only allowed when you were sick in a bed. And then, of course, sport, particularly football, a privileged right. I learned quickly that to show pain or be friendly to your opposition was, words like girl, sissy, chicken would sum up the retorts. I could thump my opponent, abuse him, elbow him in the head, or glare at him. I fitted the mould well. Then game over, handshake, smiles, a drink together, jokes, farm talk. Now that all made sense. I was your typical male. At 19, I met a girl, and for the first time ever, I showed emotion, affection and sensitivity. Normally only my horse or sheepdog got that. The feelings I felt started in my toes and moved up. I adored her. I always remember our first full body hug. From our legs to our heads, every inch touched. Beautiful. Mind, there were strict rules. That's as far as I could go. Regardless of the throbbing blood vessels in that part of my body that caused me so many embarrassments. Women are so lucky. If ever I stepped over that line and we had to get married, and both of you were looked down on for life, it wasn't worth the risk. At least I had the wild dreams. So far, life was good, no great. Then 1965, my number drawn from a barrel leads to conscription. The army, crude language, harsh training, it frightened me and most others. A year later, the army is okay. Alcohol, magazines, porn movies and crude women talk was part of this new life. Surprisingly, the army condones, even encourages this bravado. I have mates that are the best. We are very close. Then Vietnam, killing, horrific scenes, lost of mates. Our bodies tired, always worn out, the pack so heavy. Never mind, when told to get over it, don't be a wimp, move on, we obeyed. Not one funeral or service. On my first leave, after 5 months, I fly to Hong Kong. A smart-looking officer shows us a map. It tells us where we can have safe sex and no other information. We leave carrying a bag of condoms. Sex. I changed from a naive man to an animal. I remember nothing much. Money changed hands. I was drunk. The condoms on the floor nearly made me vomit. Back to war, and then I leave. The army tells me I am a fine, upstanding man. I have courage and have done my country proud. Surely the highest accolade any young man could want. I had made it. Then home. I want to drink and root. I am very angry. Lack any emotion, and old school friends rapidly abandoned me, and I am scared to see my girlfriend. The same girlfriend, my first real hug. She had written to me every day. You see, when I looked at a woman now, it was boobs first, and then plans for getting laid, the sooner the better. I call off the relationship within weeks. I've never seen her since. I become a recluse, an unemotional misfit, and anger is the only outward mood I display. I marry, and that was hard work. I work, I study, I run, I work harder than anyone else I know. I pass exams with honours. Children, another home, always moving. My wife is the sole supporter of this sad family. I offer no love, I can't. I've been there, done that. It hurts too much to lose one you love, a mate. Hence, your spirit never lets you show love again. It's not worth the risk. A doctor told me this some 30 years after the Vietnam War. and I lost too many mates. In 1995, I collapsed completely. Emotionally, I am like a little pup. I am frightened, spooked by the simplest of things, and I'm happy to die. Then I try to talk, or more accurately, to write. Now get this about me. I find emotions for the first time in decades. Now that is scary. I discover things wonderful in life. No, not degrees or work accolades or big bank account. I see my children. They are beautiful. My grandchildren are so precious. My wife is a gem. We've been married for 40 years. It's a confusing journey, I know, but at last I've become a man. Thank you.
What an incredible, incredible life that you have lived, Barry. There was a line in the end of your story, I don't know if you deleted it, but it was about the second full body hug.
Oh yeah, I deleted bits and pieces.
Barry described to me recently his 40th wedding anniversary, and can I share this?
Yeah, sure.
And how he gave his wife a full body hug, the first one since he was 19. And it just moved me so much that this man who'd endured so much pain and so much, brutality in war could feel again and could love again. So I'm so grateful for you sharing your story.
Thank you.
When you were fighting in Vietnam, can you describe to me what your fellow soldiers, your mates, meant to you?
I guess at the time there was not much thought about that, but in fact we actually love one another deeply. It sounds like the Hollywood cliche, but in fact you do put your life and they put their life on the line. Briefly, an incident once when my radio malfunctioned in the jungle, and I had to get up and try and move around to get the reception. And we were getting shot at, and I gave the signal that my radio's fucked. And my mate next to me didn't like the message I gave him. In other words, I'm getting up. And at the moment you're probably thinking, what a brave soldier. Well, I wasn't brave, I was bloody frightened. But if you now stop and think what's about to happen, they will all stand and protect me. You see, I'm putting their life on the line, not mine. They'll protect me so I won't get shot. And when you experience that at that level, and not continually, but quite a few times, I just adore those men. They're my precious friends, and I'm going to share something very intimate with you, because I've lost a lot since, through suicides and what have you. But recently we were together on Anzac Day, and one of my mates said, I hope I'm the first to die. You think about that. Because that's me too. I don't want to go to any more funerals. And it sounds, but that's your question. That's my love for them. Admittedly, it's not external love where my family's not part of that, but I sometimes think that once you go to war and that, you come back a greenie. I'm sure I'm gay. We're very emotional, we're very huggy, we're very into all that sort of thing. And sadly, for me, the pain we went through to learn to be like that is a pretty hard price to pay. But we are very, very close, very supportive. I mention that when I write about them, what good men they are, and I believe that seriously. And yet relating to Terry. Sorry. Fortunately, I was never into the drinking, but so many of them attempted to cloud what little spirit or soul they had with alcohol, and in my case it was overwork and all that sort of thing. And it's I guess our stories tonight are quite sort of over and near the edge. But before even conscription, I was already turning into your typical male of football and, that sort of thing. As I say, you grow up as a little child being taught to love and care, and then suddenly I'm playing a sport where I'm taught to hurt, and then suddenly I'm in an army where I'm told I'm a good man for killing someone.
Barry, the years of the backlash of the war, so, 30 years of post-traumatic stress syndrome, you describe in your amazing, incredible book, Well Done Those Men, of moments of going into a crowded room after you'd come back from the war and not being able to stand in the middle of the room, having to be up against the edge of the wall out of the anxiety and the phobias. You went through all of that, and you had a breakdown, and then you began to write. So with this writing process, you talk about you discovered your emotions, and then eventually you came to be able to love again. What was it in that process that enabled you to do that?
I could generalise and talk about some of the wonderful skills I managed to get, which was meditation and smell the flowers. I spent nearly 2 years involved with psychiatric treatment and a ward and pretty scary stuff. And those skills are good. I still use them, in actual fact, particularly the meditation. I still use it regularly. But it's interesting what you're saying. There was a time when something actually happened. Bing. And what it was, just briefly, was we were in the jungle in Vietnam, and look, I'll go back a step even further. When I was in the psychiatric ward, they tried to get us to speak. And this is 8 in a group. There would be 8 of you in a group, and we were all pretty screwed up. And they called us FCS, all of us, which stands for fucking carpet starer. Because they would attempt to get us to speak, and we'll go like that. And then they had tried to get us to write, which is another waste of time. But I actually wrote under the blankets of a night time, where no one could see me. It wasn't that, it just, I don't know, you can't write about what we'd done. And then I was writing about a scene in the jungle, and this is what happened. The guy in front of me was carrying a radio, I was carrying a radio, except he was the senior radio operator. And he disappeared. Not like Genie on the, rubbing the bottle, but he sank in the mud. And all you could see was the antenna, which was 9 feet, about that much of it sticking out, and we had to get him out of the mud. Had to be quick, so we reefed and pulled, and he was tangled in the roots of the mangroves and what have you. And we broke his leg and a few other things and got him out. And then he went off in a helicopter, which was very dangerous because we were actually moving into an ambush, and it was all pretty scary stuff. And the boss, there was about 30 of us, the boss or the platoon commander or whatever said to me, "Barry, you've got the senior radio." And I'd had 8 days training. This man had had 2 years. When I wrote that down, and which I said was rambling at the time, it dawned on me how I reacted at the time, and I've never acknowledged it, and that is I was completely shit scared that I would do something really wrong and put all these guys at risk. It really frightened me. I'd never spoken to a helicopter or jets or artillery. I just spoke to the other platoons near me. And what I'm getting at is when I was writing this, I stopped and thought, you poor bastard. My God. They gave you that radio. And I went into the scene and I put my arm around me. I hugged me. And I cried for me. I felt so sorry for that naive young country boy about to take over the most senior radio you could take over in the jungle. And from that moment on, if you can hear what I'm saying, I wrote looking and not sort of the other way around. It was quite bizarre to look at this person who was actually yourself. And at times, I just cried. I wanted to hold his hand, and and say to him things like, you're going to be okay, you'll get through this, you'll be fine, Barry. Look, don't be so hard on yourself, it wasn't your fault. And it sounds funny, but for me that was very comforting and strengthening for me to write like that. Which sounds bizarre, I've never heard many people do that, but...
process of compassion.
Yeah, my own...
Self-compassion.
Because as you're probably aware, most people go to war and have this breakdown and what have you, that's all because you don't like yourself, you hate yourself. You hate who you are and what you've done, and yeah.
Extraordinary.
Yeah.
But there's such a beautiful willingness to heal. Thank you, Barry. Thank you so much. Okay. Lucky last, Harry. Love to hear your story.
Fantastic. One of my favourite personal love stories occurred in my life in early 2009. I'd received a call from my mother, who was at the time living in Perth with the rest of my family of 6. When I answered her call, and I realised immediately that something was wrong by the tone of her distressed voice. She began to share with me her recent discovery of my father's financial transgressions, which had left my family completely vulnerable. My immediate emotional reactions were those of anger, fear and sorrow. I was angry because I felt as though he had betrayed the trust of all of us by making poor decisions which would affect us all. The anger moved into a great sense of fear, a fear of the unknown ramifications his actions would have on our family. The shame it could bring to our family, possibly tarnishing all of our lives. Then your imagination kicks in a way that seems out of your control. My mind began to form a myriad of probable realities and seemed to engage itself in a dialogue that was beyond my conscious influence. Will we lose everything? Will I have to sacrifice my entire life savings? But I've worked my fucking ass off here in Melbourne, basically starting from nothing to be earning good money. That's fucking bullshit. I'm not giving up anything for his mistakes. But what about my brother and sister? They shouldn't have to suffer, should they? I'd become a prisoner of my own subjective mind. This was not love. I decided to act from these emotions with a phone call to my father. Dad, what the hell's going on? What have you done? There was silence. Well, be a man and fucking answer me. He replied by saying, I can't. I won't tell you the extent of it all, but I fucked up. How the fuck could you do this to us all? Just listen to me. Don't get involved. Keep what you've worked hard for in Melbourne. I swiftly responded with, well, you're the last fucking person I'll ever take advice from. I then hung up. Moments later, I sat and thought about the phone call I'd made to my father and what I'd achieved from it. The answer was absolutely nothing. Nothing positive came from that phone call. My feelings of anger, fear and sorrow were not eradicated from that phone call. Rather, I had transmitted those feelings onto my father, which would have no doubt exacerbated the pain he was already feeling. The more that I reflected upon the situation, the more I had remembered the infinite power of unconditional love and how it had worked wonders in not only my life, but the lives of many great people who had moved mountains throughout history. I remembered the role that unconditional love my mother and father had played in my life. A newborn baby cannot survive without the unconditional love it receives from its mother. And the unconditional love my mother gave me, that was essential for giving me life as an infant, has never ceased. I guess that's just a mother's way. My father, on the other hand, was not my biological father. He was a white Australian. He looked absolutely nothing like me. In fact, the polar opposite. He owed me nothing. He only married my mother, not me. He didn't have to try to be my dad, but he was. He was in every way that he could be, to the best of his ability. One example which sums up his unconditional love was when we were at the airport together as a family waiting for Dad to board a flight. A rude man asked him in front of all of us so we could all hear, "So you're the father of those and a stepfather to the black one?" Dad looked at this man dead centre in the eyes and said with enormous conviction, "I'm a father to them all. They are my kids." I quickly remembered that love is the foundation of human life. I'd seen it work miracles throughout my life, setting free all those who chose its power. I suddenly picked up the phone with a sense of purpose and pushed the redial button. My father answered the phone, still evidently affected by the last phone call. That is when I told him immediately that I love him. I could hear him sobbing whilst I struggled to articulate these words in the midst of extreme emotion. "Dad, despite the mistakes you have made, I will always love you with all my heart. I'm so sorry. I love you so much." He replied with, "I love you too. I'm so sorry for everything. I love you." I told him not to be sorry and ended the phone call once again by saying, "I love you." That was the last time I ever spoke to my father. The next day he ended his life. The police found his body a week later. Unconditional love has allowed me to stand before you today to share a story of great pride and fulfillment, rather than a story of deep regret and sorrow. I'm eternally grateful that I chose love.
I'm rather choked up. I can see a few tears in the audience too. Harry, incredible capacity that you have and that you had, and just so grateful that you were able to choose love in that moment.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think, my belief and my understanding is that love is our natural state of being. When we're able to transcend our mind and our body, we're able to find this field, and that's the field of love and bliss. And what actually happened after the first phone call was, all the activity that was going on in my mind, that's what I reacted from, those compulsive thoughts that we have. And when I was able to transcend those thoughts, I came back to that field, and that's love. And I'm so grateful that I was able to snap out of it, within 15 minutes. Some people it takes years to touch that field, and I'm extremely grateful that I was able to snap out of that.
From obviously when you heard the news that he had taken his own life, I'm imagining there was an emotional response.
Yeah, absolutely. I was here in Melbourne, and I was living in Collingwood at the time, and he'd been missing for a week, and I actually went back to, when he was missing, after the day he was missing, I spoke to the club and I said, "Look, I need to get back to Perth," and they were fully supportive, so flew back to Perth, and I spent 3 days there. Couldn't find Dad. We thought hopefully he's just taken off, he's made these mistakes, hopefully he's taken off, and he's just trying to find time to sort things out. But days went past, and we started to think the worst, but we still had a glimmer of hope inside of us. I realised I was doing nothing productive in Perth. We were just waiting, so I flew back to Melbourne, and that's when I got the phone call from my mum, and I got on luckily there was one flight left, and I got on that flight, and I just remember I was just trembling in my seat, and that was the longest flight I'd ever. I've travelled to Brazil. It takes almost 30 hours. That 4 hours took an eternity. But there was a point during that flight where I realised a reality, and that reality is that at some point in our lives we will all have to suffer. Suffering is a natural state of mind, but it's not a natural state of life. And you actually get to choose what your state of life is. And that's what my choice was. I wouldn't be a victim, I would be a survivor. And I would use this story to be able to shed light into other people's lives who have, that may possibly come into this situation. And actually, I can happily and proudly say before you today is that, this has been one of the biggest blessings in my life.
Wow, that's extraordinary. So how do you go from being an AFL footballer on the field, like before the bounce, you guys are all bumping each other and rough and all of that stuff, and it's tough, like you get pummeled all the time, all those crazy tackles and cuddles afterwards. But how do you go from the tough guy on the field?
I'll tell a funny story. Last week we played our traditional rivals, Carlton, and
boo.
and there's always a bit of tension before the game, and I'll play in defence, and there was a player, Mitch Robinson. I know him away from the football field. I met him a few times. Lovely guy, and he came up to me and he started bumping me and getting into me, and I never retaliate because I believe you can't fight a force with a force. And I go, mate, what are you doing? And I said, I went to shake his hand, and he first refused, but I looked him in the eyes, and I said, shake my hand. So he grabbed it in the midst of his aggression, just quickly shook it, and then went back to. But yeah, that's
fantastic.
I think no matter what, my whole life, I've been judged for things that what I call lie on the surface of life. Whether it be my skin colour, whether it be where I was born. Now my occupation, a lot of people say to me, oh, you're a footballer, but I'm not, I'm just a human being. And when you strip away or transcend all of those layers, I'm just like you. And so that once you define something, or once you define yourself, you actually limit yourself. And I choose not to define myself with anything apart from I am love.
Whoa! That leads me to my last question for each of the men, but Harry's now answered his one, so I'm going to ask Barry. So, what do you really think about love? It's pretty simple, but pretty clear.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Timothy?
I'm all for it.
Bring it on! Shower this man!
No,
No, I'm kidding. Beautiful. Okay. So, if there's any questions from the audience?
My question really is for Barry, and talking about the women that you went to in Hong Kong. There's a lot of stories about women in war and providing comfort. And they're often called comfort women. But for you, was it a comfort, or was it a release of anger, or what did you actually get from those encounters?
To be quite honest, I was rotten drunk for 3 days. I was stunned when I counted the amount of empty whiskey bottles in the room. And it wasn't until I actually sobered up a little bit I realised I'd actually had sex. And that's when I wanted to vomit, when I saw the condoms all over the floor. But sadly, I can't answer your question as much as there wasn't much clear memory. I realised that I think I'd been asked. But perhaps going back a step, which I never put in what I wrote, but landing in the plane in Hong Kong and being greeted by an American soldier, there's about 100 of us on leave, and there was only 2 Australians. The first comment was, I believe you Australians drink piss, this is where you get it. And the Americans were stunned that we drank urine. And I said, oh well, let them think that. And then the next thing is that we were told where to have safe sex and not get a load, but then we were told where not to go. It was a map had red on it, and then the other one for entertainment, we could go and watch live sex, and that included with animals. And that's the end of Welcome to Hong Kong, nothing cultural or historical or architecture, and that was it. And your job then, and as I said, I couldn't answer your question, but was to go back to base camp and brag about what I'd done. because if you didn't brag, you get asked and all the rest of it. And it's very confusing when you're not very articulate, and then to top it all off, the army tells you you're a very good man, and you're very upstanding, and you've done your country very proud, and that still goes on. And yeah, so I can't, as I said, I'm sort of mumbling and rambling around it a little bit, but I'm trying to paint the picture that I know many years later, probably the most interesting thing I can say about this funny book, as I said I wrote, is I've had close on 100,000 emails and about 30,000 letters, because the core of the book, particularly with soldiers and that, they relate totally to the honesty that I'm talking to you tonight. That's their experience, except they've never been going to talk about it. And, you know, what joy surely is there in paying a woman money and then jumping on her, you know, compared to love and affection and sincerity and all those beautiful words. You know, there's no comparison, none.
Thank you.
It strikes me that, you know, you've talked about, you know, family love a lot. We've talked about the love of soldiers. But there's sort of been a neglect of the topic of, I guess, romantic love. And just sort of wondering if you want to speak to maybe how that's still perhaps a taboo, and those sorts of feelings and expressing them sort of in an open way, as men are, perhaps we're socialized not to do that in a very open way. And that the choices, I guess, in the stories that have been told kind of reflect that, perhaps?
Romantic love.
How long have you got?
Good one.
5 minutes.
That's interesting. I know I chose not to talk about romantic love tonight when I could, because I'm actually extremely expressive, maybe too expressive about romantic love and falling for somebody. And I think maybe just been too expressive and possibly written songs about it, and it sort of, you feel like it comes back to bite you, or maybe just after time being a little, you're so precious about it that maybe this isn't the correct place to do it. But to answer your question, I mean, amongst friends and in a hurtling Tarago going through the country, I'll tell anyone who steps in with a cheese sandwich about how much I love my partner and have no qualms about it. Possibly to the point of nausea. But I've actually always been like that. I don't know why that happened. I think of myself, I'm absolutely a romantic, and from when I was even 12 or 13 was very expressive about how much I felt for the people that I was feeling. Some people just tumble into songwriting, others work at it.
Harry?
Well, my romantic life has been quite short, simply because I'm 24 years of age, so these guys could teach me a thing or two, I'm sure. They already told me a bit out the back, so I can't wait to get home and try those moves out. Look, it's a touchy one for me because I've had limited experience, but the experience that I've had from the relationships that I've had is that until I think what helps you giving love to someone else is to fully love yourself, and you can't possibly radiate love to something external to yourself if you don't fully love yourself. That love is reserved, and that's what I've sort of learnt in my short romantic life.
How does, when you feel love for a woman, say, beyond a friend, how does that make you feel, or what does that bring up?
For me, it's quite...
Sorry, I totally laid myself over there.
Well, for me, I've been in two relationships.
Shush now, you two.
I've been in two relationships, and I found it quite confrontational because I've felt guilty in a way because the two relationships that I've had, I haven't been able to give all of myself because I haven't yet confronted all of myself. And until I've confronted all of those demons and are able and prepared to share them with someone else, I don't think I'm quite fit for that romantic love or to be able to give myself to everyone.
Why not fit? What might they see?
Not so much what they might see, but I think I have to be fair on them. I have to be able to deal with those demons myself because if you keep them guarded, I'm a believer that if you wish to engage in that love with someone else, you should be completely transparent so you both can evolve together, and I think that would save a lot of stress in the future.
Maybe they can love your demons.
Oh, absolutely, but you have to actually, for them to know you, for them to know your demons and understand them, you have to make them available, and that can be part of the process. But if you suppress them and hide them, and they might come up later on. But I think that will cause a lot of stress if you're not actually revealing all of yourself. But again, like I said, I admit I'm very young, but this is just what I've learnt so far.
Down here.
Hi, thank you for sharing your stories tonight. I'd like to know from each of you, I guess, what you think keeps the love alive.
Bad timing.
Wisdom in hindsight?
Wisdom in hindsight, yeah. I'm divorced and I think that, as Harry was saying, everything I didn't like about myself came out sporadically and badly, and a lot of blame throwing in at 41 now. I think just this, what I talked about this expectation, and if you have an expectation for either a romantic partner or a parent-child, the expectation that people are evolving and that you're going to go on that journey with them, I think. Not just... I remember saying to someone that I love very dearly that, I cannot flip and wait to get old with you, to see you when you're 82 and spilling your Milo. Or next week, just can't wait to see what kind of, what that person's going to be like then. And I've always found that, that works.
Just very briefly.
Yes.
Harry?
Well, I think I tend to go on Harry's line that have I got a roof over my head? Yep. Have I got a meal? Yes. Do I feel secure? Yep. And yet all those things worry people, interest rates and those sort of things. But I think then when you are in a relationship with someone, you have to look over the whole thing, that you've got a human being who's prepared to be with you. And to give you an example, which I don't like talking about my wife very much, certainly in public, but I can remember when we were first married and my wife had come home and I'd say, would you like a coffee? And she'd say, oh, that's nice, sweetheart, and get her a coffee. And the next day, my wife works in the medical system, and the next day I'd say, would you like a coffee? If I want a bloody coffee, I'll ask for one, all right? And what I'm getting at is the trivia of that comment, and that's not my wife, but the comment. See, I'd get angry. She has no right to speak to me like that. Nod. But see, now if my wife said that, I smile. It's just so beautiful to hear that. I mean that seriously, I'm not joking. I'm very serious, because she's like me. There's a truckload of faults with all of us. And if you can look around and over and through and hit the other side, my wife is precious. She's the most beautiful, beautiful person with all these bloody faults. And it's a deal. That's what the deal is. And it's like Harry was saying, he's still a suckling calf, this guy. But that's the thing that, this man's 24, would hear that wisdom when he said, that's what I want to do. I want to learn that. And that's so true. It's so true. And And so for me, I hope that answers your question.
just quickly, I think that, as I mentioned earlier, I think our natural state is love. And so there's no need to keep love alive. It's always there. You just have to find it. And you have to peel back those layers that we've placed on there, those expectations, those labels. And it's always there. And I think the first key to being able to love, or using your terminology, keep love alive, is to be able to love yourself. And once you love yourself, that's when you look external and actually see, you can actually see yourself in others or in other things. That's why a mother has a unique love with her child, is because it was actually a part of her. And when it comes out, it's actually separate, but she doesn't see the separation as, you know, someone walking down the street sees. She sees that thing as a part of her. But in actual fact, we're all interconnected in society on many levels. We breathe the same air. You know, we rely on each other through economies. And when you're able to see yourself in others, whether it be, you know, a beggar on the street or even someone that can commit the most heinous of crimes, that's when you see the world is love.
Beautiful. That's all we have time for questions, I'm sorry. I just want to thank these extraordinary men for their bravery, for pulling down the walls, enabling us to see into them, and for their honesty in their stories, but both in their sharing. Absolutely beautiful and inspiring. Thank you both all so much.